Daylight. Okay, good morning. We're going to start today's meeting of January 9, 2025. Happy New Year to all of us and all of those that are listening. And today's agenda, we'll just start off item number 1, roll call of officers.
Commissioner Uranga. Commissioner Zargis.
Present.
Commissioner Lear.
Here.
Commissioner Jimenez. Commissioner Fisher.
Here.
Vice Chair Zerniak. Chair Acosta.
Present. Item number 2, approval or changes to the agenda. Commissioners.
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. It's second. All those signify by saying aye. In favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Item number 3, approval of minutes, regular meeting number December 12th, 2024.
I move that we approve the regular minutes of the regular meeting of December 12th, 2024.
I second.
We have a motion on the floor. It's second. Any discussion on the motion? No discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. Old business. No old business. Okay. Item number 5, new business. Election of officers, chairperson, vice chair, and secretary. Well, you're looking at me. I'm looking at you.
So I had some discussions with Bill and with Mel, and I'm going to nominate Bill for chair. We don't need a, do we need a second on a nomination? No.
Do we need a second?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we
I'll
need-
second that.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? The ayes have it.
I'm staying out of it. Thank you.
You asked for it.
I asked for it, I guess.
What about Vice Chair? Vice Chair and Secretary.
Yeah. So we need a nomination now for vice chair.
And currently, Dr. Zerniak is vice chair.
Currently, that's Commissioner Zerniak. Do we have a second? Do I have a nomination for vice chair?
I'll nominate Dr. Cerniak for vice chair.
Do we have a second for that?
Second?
Okay, so moved by Commissioner Lear, second by Commissioner Acosta. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next, secretary. Open for nomination for secretary.
Is Dan's secretary, isn't he?
I don't
Dan?
think we had a clerk last time, did we?
No?
It's currently vacant, Mr. Chair. And Commissioner Zerniak, it was held by Montañez, Commissioner Montañez.
Yeah, I didn't think, I didn't think we got replaced after Montañez. So we open for secretary.
I'm going to nominate Dan Lear for secretary. You got it
Second.
from Mel.
Second from Mel? Okay, moved by Commissioner Zerniak, second by Commissioner Acosta. Dan, congratulations, you're the secretary. Okay. Next. Oh,
Do I get?
behave. Okay, next item under 5, new business, is the approval of the 2025 annual notice requirements for regular, special, and emergency meetings and the 2025 schedule of meetings. It's in your packet. To review them? Or?
A second.
Okay, I have a motion from Commissioner Zerniak, second from Commissioner Fisher to approve the annual notice of requirements and the schedule of meetings. All those in favor signify by saying aye. We don't need a individual vote on that, I don't think, do we? No. All those in favor signify.
I move for approval of the bylaws.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Fisher to approve the bylaws. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second, Commissioner Lear. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? The ayes have it. We've approved the bylaws. Next, we have discussion on Chapter 350, the Unified Development Code.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Fisher sent staff a list of questions that we thought would be appropriate to address in this meeting. And I did pass out a copy. And they mainly refer to building services. So we do have Sean here as well as Christina. So if you would like to address one by one, Commissioner Fisher?
Okay.
Thank you.
First of all, on fines, I'm not clear on how the fines are calculated, and I don't think many people that come to us are clear on how the fines are calculated. So I would like to have some information, how is that calculated? When we vote on something, we know how much we're going to be charging that person, or at least a range, okay? And how is the original fee calculated?
For,
Or is it listed somewhere?
we can send you the fee schedule or the section of the code that has those. But it's based on the project valuation. And so, you know, obviously the larger the valuation of the project, the larger their fee is going to be. For certain things, it's a straight fee, like a driveway fee is a straight fee. But in most cases, it's based on the valuation.
Now, we have had several cases before us where we've had somebody come in and they need a permit, and while we've had somebody go out to investigate, there were other structures on their property that did not have permits, and so they would charge for every one of the structures. Was that based on the total project? Was that based on just that structure? None of that is clear.
So for each building, there is a separate building permit fee.
Okay?
And so they would be fined for each project that they did without a permit. So if
Okay.
they have, let's say they have 3 storage sheds that they constructed without a permit, and if those required a permit, they would be charged the triple fee.
Do we have any opportunity for people who self-report to have a lesser fee?
We do at the discretion of staff, if they're trying to come into compliance, if they genuinely didn't know, then we do have some discretion to just charge them the regular fee.
I guess my feeling is that we need to be more resident-friendly and also business-friendly to try to, encourage people to come forward and get some of these things resolved, not hit them with 3 times every time, and so they hide. And then we end up having to pay for an inspector to go out and check them and find all these problems, We need to stay focused on the safety of our public and the property values, and that should be our main focus. Sometimes I feel like we are punitive in our actions with the fees. The other thing is, I'm hearing in a lot of our cases that many of the people that come forward are ignorant of the codes, and they will say, well, I talked to the realtor, or I talked to my neighbor, and
There are realtors who are also members. And of course, we're always willing to go to any meetings or provide any specific training as requested by the community.
do we have ability to add a chat site to our to our site on the internet where somebody could go in and ask a question and they just get an automatic response, or just give them a guideline to where they have to go? If they say, I want to come in and I want to add an additional second dwelling on my property, that they can start asking questions. Do we have anything like that, or the
We
capability to
don't,
set
but
that
that's a
up?
good suggestion. We can talk to our PIO and IT departments and see if that's a possibility. What we have provided in the past are other informational documents that we have on the website to just give instructions on when you need a permit and what documents are required when you submit for a permit, but I don't
It
think
is
we've-
cumbersome, though.
It is,
so
but
can
we've
you-
never discussed having a chat feature, but that's a good suggestion that we can look
You will
into.
do that for us?
Yes.
Okay. On that, that's the first section. Any other comments from the other commissioners?
I think AI is a great idea for helping with some of this. Any further questions or discussion on this issue?
Okay, the second item is that we had recently passed some changes to container permits. And I still find it to be a very gray area. I recognize that there's a permit required for containers. I mean, you're gonna have to look at containers that are located in a residential area, containers on a farm, containers in a commercial zone. There's a lot of reasons for containers. Some people bring them in and set up an office. Some people, a secondary dwelling. Some people are just storing supplies. And so I think we need some clarification on usage and where, where it's going to be located.
So, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Fisher, what we were trying to clarify when we made those changes, and I think maybe we didn't succeed as well as we thought we might be, was clarifying when you can have a primary use. There are certain, well, specifically residential districts, you need to have a primary use before you can have a storage container or any other type of accessory dwelling. And we've had a lot of issues in the county where people want to locate a container, some other structure on a lot that's vacant, and it's not permissible that way because in residential zones, you can't have storage as primary use or you can't have a garage as a primary use. And what we were trying to clarify was that you can have a container, but you have to have a primary use on that property first, if it's residential. So if you have your home there and you want to install a container for storage or even as a secondary dwelling, that's appropriate if you have the building permits that might be required. But you can't just start putting storage containers on a property that's vacant.
What about a location that's under construction that the primary use isn't there yet?
Right, if it's under construction, there are some concessions for a temporary use. And we do allow, obviously, containers as a temporary use when you are in active construction on a property. If you have a building permit, then obviously you might have materials that you need to store. And in those cases, you are allowed to put a container of some type for that storage.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Sean, CID now requires a permit for containers, am I correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct. It's in the International Building Code, the 2021.
So what says precedence? Do you set precedence or does CID?
No, we just go off of the building code and what the permitting process is. It's a structure over 120 square feet. Any structure over 120 square feet requires a building permit. Again, like Commissioner Fisher mentioned and Christina, if it's for construction, sorry, it's fine. Less than 180 days, they have an active building permit and such, then they are allowed to be placed without a permit.
And I also understand that they also require that any signage on the container has to be taken off. In other words, not to have CX or any of these names on these containers.
So what we look at is the containers contain a placard, basically stating what the weight load is, the height, the specifications. There's a placard that is placed on a container. That typically stays with it like would be with a modular home and such. Any other specifications on a container, there's really nothing set forth that they have to remove those. So it can still have the name of the container. If you wish to modify it, then we have to have an engineer and such. And so there's just a process to go through.
Okay.
Commissioner Fisher.
Okay, next one.
Next one.
Surveys. I don't know if you folks are aware that getting a survey now in our area can take up to a year, depending on who you're using. And my comment is that every time we do something, we want a new survey. So I would caution you, every time we require a survey, a new survey, we need to look and see, has any change happened on that property? The land is not gonna move, guys. The dirt's where it is, okay? So if you've had some construction on it or something else or some changes, then I could see that. But just requiring a survey for everything, understand, number one, it's expensive. Number two, having it done delays the whole process considerably. So my question is, how long is a survey good for? Are there conditions where you don't have to redo a survey after 5 years or whatever?
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Fisher, we actually did look into this question recently, and I don't believe that there is an expiration for a survey. In most cases, if you have a survey and there are no new structures and there are no inaccuracies or errors on the survey, we will accept it.
Super. I understand if new plating or new zoning or something, that would require a survey, but just be aware that it does take a long time to get one, okay?
Yes, and we've heard as well, we understand there aren't that many surveyors here in town, and obviously they're very busy with all of the work that's happening here.
And, well, I imagine that those surveys, the drone surveys, are just as acceptable as standard, okay. I've already covered the chat thing and a public information campaign I call before building, that's what I stipulated before, is it something that encourages people to call in, call before building, not only to see where the power lines or the gas lines and all that is, but what are the permits? How much are you going to be delayed before you start building? Again, that could be accomplished through some kind of a chat program. And then I see a lot as I drive in, I see a lot of pre-engineered structures that are going up. And how do you quickly get, what are the foundations requirements for these pre-engineered structures? Some of the pre-engineered structures are built to be converted into homes. Some are not. Some are just storage. So where does one go to get that kind of information? It's not, I go through the codes, believe I do go through the codes, but it's hard to find all this information.
You're right, and we don't have anything on our website. Typically, people will call if they are asking on the requirements for a pre-manufactured building. But that's also information that we can provide directly on the website. If not with the chat feature, just directly on the building permits website so that it can be readily accessible.
Okay, yeah, something that would be readily, and if they can't be answered through a chat, then you have somebody, a representative, call back to that person to answer some questions, okay?
Commissioner Fisher? Christine, just a comment. Whether it's a building permit, a zoning or a rezone, subdivisions, I guess, are different, but it seems to me that these processes, if they're not, they should be linear. In other words, if you go through steps 1 through 52, however many there are, and at the end it's approved, you're done. It moves on. So I think one of the things that might help, probably whatever the building permits in particular, if there was a sheet of paper that you could hand somebody, or if it sat on the website and said, if you do these 10 steps and it's approved at the end, you're done. I think one of the problems that Commissioner Fisher is raising is that sometimes as you look at the UDC, and I don't think it was designed this way, I think it just happens, that it's hard to find what you're supposed to do. Or you do 5 things and you missed 1 step because it's in another chapter. So it seems like there should be some kind of guide. And I know that the consultants actually wrote a guide to using the UDC, and I don't know where that is. I have a copy of it, yeah. So it just seems like a clear set of steps for somebody that's applying would be helpful.
I think, yeah, that's a great suggestion as well. And we actually have process maps for all of our different application types that we had created when we did the efficiency review several years ago. And so I think it would, obviously take a little cleanup, but we could probably just use those process maps and create something so that people can have a document that tells them what the process is going to be and what steps they have to take.
Yeah, okay.
That way when they come in to get their permit, they've got all these documents in order, and it reduces the amount of time that you have to spend, waiting,
Absolutely.
okay, now go do this, now go do that.
Right.
Kind of thing, okay? FEMA has been a bone of contention with me because when you go and you put a building up, we do not have any elevations throughout the county, not throughout the county at least, and that are structured. I mean, when you look at that and you want to build something, there's not a baseline where you know how high you have to put your foundation or your to set it up. And what happens is that you come in to get a permit and suddenly you've got to do this baseline. Oh, and by the way, they want to add another half foot to that, and then they want to add another half foot to that. Pretty soon, you're on stilts, okay? So we need to get elevations. We need to get some baseline elevations for the county so that we know where the flood zones are and what the baselines. And the last time I went through this, it was somebody in Midwest that came in and did something, I guess through Google Maps or something, and that's what we ended up getting. We have to find the money somewhere to have our surveys done for our county.
Don't we have LiDAR? We have LiDAR elevations, don't we?
Yeah.
And your name is?
Good morning, Michael Garza, Engineer Supervisor for the Flood Commission and County Floodplain Administrator. We actually do have base flood elevations for the county. We're a participant in the National Floodplain Insurance Program, which gives the county the ability to host the flood maps in our building, and then the Flood Commission does the floodplain administration. And our participation in the NFIP allows residents of the county to have the ability to obtain a flood insurance policy. So basically the way it's structured is they call it the regulation staircase. And there's 5 levels to that staircase. And as you progress up the staircase, you have more, comprehensive or more detailed maps. Our levels have been detailed, studied by FEMA, and they have a base flood elevation of whether it's a depth relative to the ground or whether it's an actual elevation to the 100th of a decimal. Those exist. We have all those in the county. The A zones are considered to be unstudied, where basically FEMA is just saying that we know that based off topography, there's 12 inches or more of water in this location, but there is not an elevation. So the way that we treat those is we call them unnumbered A zones because they don't have a base flood number, but we have a community determined elevation. It's 12 inches above highest adjacent grade for all areas in the county except for Hatch, which is a low-lying area, so we have a higher standard there, which is 18. So we have a process, we have the rules. We offer a service, the Flood Commission offers a service called a flood zone determination. And basically it's just someone sending an email or a phone call or anything like that to our office, and they can say, what is my flood risk? What zone am I in? And we basically provide them with a sheet that says the property is in or is out of the flood zone, or the structure that you're proposing is in or out. And they can then take that to their insurance company or their lender, who are the ones who determine the premiums and all that, and they can go through the mortgage process that way. So if we're talking about putting flow charts or any sort of aid in there to a prospective applicant into the UDC for permits and all that, it may be beneficial to add some, before you start the process, here's some things you should check. And maybe flood zone determination would be one of those steps.
Well, 10 years ago, when we set up our winery, there was no baseline. Has that happened since then?
We've had FEMA flood maps since 1991.
Yep, and there was no baseline.
Those were A zones at the time, and we got effective flood maps in 2016, which moved us up the staircase and gave us those more specific zones.
The concerns were that the flood zone was designated in the lower properties, and it was also on the hill.
So there's for example, AH is a shallow flooding. So like Talavera, it's on a 2% slope. It's a depth. It's not an actual elevation because you have a consistent 2% slope across the whole area. So it wouldn't make sense to put it at a certain elevation. But if they're in a depth area of 2 feet, say, they just, wherever the four corners of their house is going to be, you pick the highest one, you come up 2 feet from there. The AH zone, there is one in the county down there off of, it's like by the Coos Deer area in like Doña Road. That is basically ponding where water is going to get there and it's going to sit. And so when they, factor in topography and everything, they can give you an actual elevation. So we tell homeowners, you got to be here or above. AE zones are more channelized flood paths, and so those have profiles in them, and so they've modeled it, and they have, I have this whole binder in my office, and it's got, a bunch of elevations in there that I have to use a ruler and kind of figure it out, but that's why I'm the floodplain administrator with a license to be a certified floodplain manager. Is when someone has that type of question, I'm the one who is trained to look at that information and provide them with the elevating requirements.
So we no longer require property owners to do baseline elevations.
When a homeowner applies for a flood or for a building permit in a flood zone, it's a requirement for them to have an elevation certificate along with their building permit application. They have to get, so for a site-built home, you have to have 3 throughout the process. One is existing conditions, so we have to show, existing conditions of the property wherever it is, and then at that point, we tell them where they need to elevate. The second elevation certificate is before they pour their foundation. So they trench their utilities, put up their forms, and then we survey it to make sure if you poured your slab, would it be compliant? Once we confirm that, they can continue all the way through, and then before the certificate of occupancy is released, we require the third one to make sure that nothing was changed throughout the course of construction. And then the homeowner can then use those 3 in comparison to one another and prove to their insurance that they elevated appropriately or whatever the case may be.
And this is a requirement throughout the county?
It's in the UDC, yes.
It's not, it's not just in the flood zone areas, it's a requirement for every piece of property in the county.
If your structure is going to be, if any corner of your structure is within a flood zone
Okay, so
boundary,
it's the flood
then
zone.
that's the requirement. But if you, like, for example, if your property has a flood zone, but your structure is outside of it, you're not required. You're able to if you would like to obtain a policy, but the trigger for, I guess the requirement is with the lending institution. And so if a lending institution is going to provide you with a flood insurance policy, you have to have all this documentation.
And at the time somebody comes to us requesting a permit for construction, we notify them of their flood zone status.
So it gets sent to building services and then it gets distributed among the departments. When it comes to our department, that's the information that we will provide to the applicant during our review.
What is the time frame between them talking, the person talking to the buildings and then getting information from you?
It's
on the flood
improved
zone?
quite a bit since we've gotten the electronic submittals. I mean, we typically have like an
It's
internal.
within a week?
I mean, less than that, really. I mean, when we get a permit in, we don't like to hold it for more than a day or two, depending on if it's a Friday or whatever it may be, but we try to get them out as soon as possible. But obviously, like you mentioned earlier, I mean, if they require an EC and they don't know that when they come in, and then they have to go obtain services of surveyor, and it may sit in the pending category for a while because I can't release it until I get the information that I need. So we route it to other departments so they can continue to go through the review process, but I can't, I guess, give them an approval until I have the information I need.
I think this all goes back to what I think, was it Bob that you were saying about a checklist sort of to have them come in and know that this is what's going to be you're going to be looked at. And it's not all of it, it's not all inclusive, but at least a starting point. Okay. Those were my comments.
If you have any other FEMA-related questions, you can contact our office.
Not on FEMA at present, it just seemed like we did change the FEMA zoning at one time. I mean, it started one way and then we changed it. But there is an area that, in our area, that is on a hill that is considered FEMA, which it is not. So there's some obvious, I think we need to look at it. Are there really any, did we make some mistakes and we need to correct them?
So I guess that process, it's not a county process. All we do is we're the facilitator of the program. So it's done on a federal level.
Okay.
Whenever there is because there are errors that we've found before, and there's an administrative process that we go through to change the map, and it's called a letter of map change, but it costs about 10 grand for the submittal and 9 months. And we've done that a few times, but that's exclusive of the actual engineering that is, because you have to basically prove to FEMA. You can't just say there's an error, go fix it. You have to say, here's the error, here's what it shows, here's what it should be, and here's all the information that substantiates that. And then it takes 6 to 9 months and 10 grand. And then if they approve it, then they'll come back with a revised map. But like it's been since 2016 since we revised them. So we're in the cycle of the county budget where we're looking at what we're going to spend in the next fiscal year. And we've already talked about seeing what it would take to update the flood maps, because if I have to spend 10 grand every time I find a problem, if it only costs maybe 120 or something to do the engineering to revise them, I'd be willing to look at that, but I'm still trying to figure out what that looks like.
But it is initiated through the county.
If I wanted to revise the maps, I mean,
Okay,
as far as FEMA's concerned, there's nothing wrong with what we have.
thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Anything else? Commissioner Acosta. Before we start, I screwed up. Can you see Eileen and state your name and be sworn in?
Yes.
I don't believe, we don't need to swear in right now since we're
No,
not
just
running
information.
on a public
Okay.
hearing. But thank you for
I
remembering
didn't
the
do it when he
process.
first came up. I was looking at something else. Okay, go ahead, Michael.
Did someone have a question?
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead. Bill.
Just recently, we had a subdivision, Talavera. Okay. I just took a trip there just recently, and there's a lot of property there that is basically being sold, and they're under, it's all arroyo, okay? So how do you calculate the CFM on some of these arroyos for FEMA? I mean, you gave us the, I think you have it on their website, right?
Chair Zarges, Commissioner Acosta, are you talking about the flow rate within the arroyos? Or-
Well, there's some arroyos there, and there's some property being sold. And that property being sold just transverse on a north and south axis, and they're quite deep. And so when you look at the CFM on that, right, and the SWIP plan that you have to have, right? Am I right, Sean? You have to have a SWIP plan to apply for a permit, right?
Mr. Chair, Chair Acosta, that would basically depend on how much acre, if you're disturbing more than an acre on a set of, on a property, then a SWIP plan could be determined. And most properties, you're going to disturb more than an acre with the driveway, with the building pad and such. And so what really comes into play, and Michael can address this, is more of a grading and drainage plan that may be required if there's more than 4% slope on that property in that aspect.
There's a difference between individual lot permitting and subdivision permitting. So like Sean said, for the individual permit, a grading and drainage plan signed and sealed by an engineer is the requirement. And that's for properties that are, have a major arroyo, flood zone, or 4% slope. And that, the intent of that is basically to give the county assurance that there's no adverse impact caused by the development. And you said, how do you calculate this and that? The county's not calculating anything. That's what the engineer's responsibility is to do. And then the county and our technical staff kind of QA/QCs it, make sure that the methodology used is the same that is approved in the code, and that there are no typos, errors, things like that. When it comes to a subdivision, if there is a subdivision being developed and a flood zone running through it, that is in excess of 50 lots or 5 acres, then they do have to establish base flood elevations for every lot within the subdivision. And that there's a subdivision going up in Chaparral right now, that I forget what it's called, but it's north of Lisa Drive, but they're going through that process. There's a flood zone going through there, and even though some of the homes are not in the flood zone, it's a NFIP and FEMA requirement that if a flood zone exists within the lot or within the development that's 50 lots or more, they have to establish the base flood elevations. So we can put them on the plat and, you know.
The reason why I'm saying is on the percolation rate of septic tanks. Do you have to have a soil sample on any of those septic tanks that are may be going up there? You know how it is, septic, public sewer, it dictates development.
Yeah, we
And we
typically,
in the commission don't want to allow something that's not going to be correct.
yeah, so the only thing for septic is we typically ask for a setback from like a flow path. We can't really restrict them from putting a septic tank in the flood zone. We don't have that in our code. But, you know, I don't want them to put it in an arroyo, for example. But the way the flood zones are is it's often the flow path and then a buffer outside of it. And that's for, you know, when the arroyo overtops, it kind of, you know, overextends and goes that way. So I kind of like to put a buffer on it of, you know, 10 to 20 feet, depending on the topography, to prevent, you know, a septic tank or leach lines from contaminating whatever water's going downstream, but there's nothing codified in there. There is some utility problems in Talavera, like they have a lot of propane tanks out there. A propane tank is considered a utility servicing the structure directly, and it's above ground. So if there's a propane tank in a flood zone, it has to be adequately anchored to resist flotation or anything like that. So it's got to be like bolted to a foundation, and the foundation has to be designed to where it's not going to, you know, come up and flow downstream and end up in someone else's living room. So I hope that answered your question. But.
Well, yeah, we more or less, but anyway, we're, when subdivisions come to play, we have to make sure that we assess the situation according to how it's presented to us and make a final determination whether it's going to be a yes or a no, or a yes with maybe amendments that we need to make sure that they adhere to. So now knowing that, we can always bring you back in the event that we needed to have further discussion regarding, so we can have court of record that we're doing the right thing.
Sure, and for what it's worth, it might be a good time to mention it, but I understand that the county's code is limited and it's gray, and there's a lot of flood stuff that could be more detailed. So what we're doing right now is we've hired WSP to create an addendum to the UDC, which it's a drainage design manual, and other flood control authorities up north, AMAFCA, SCAFCA, they have a 30, 40-page drainage design manual that's very technical and not intended for the public, but for an engineer or someone who's doing the subdivision process. It gives them more options, it gives them more detailed options, and it alleviates all these, you know, 4 or 5 review kind of things that we're getting through, because it goes through a lot more engineering type of steps. That should be done around June, and we'll take it through P&Z and VOCC, and we'll, you know, give an explanation of what is being, there shouldn't be any changes, but what is being described better and how it affects the code and everything like that. And hopefully that will alleviate some of the issues, engineering related and flood related, that come up during permitting and subdivisions. And we intend to space it out to where it's for, you know, we talk about our requirements for individual lots or for small subdivisions, summary subdivisions, and for large scale subdivisions. So it's separated and kind of tiered out of what the technical, the engineering department and what the Flood Commission is going to be looking for during these types of reviews.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your presentation.
So we just got this, right? So in looking at this, these are things that are required for a building permit. Number one is the bound set of plans. And then on the summary sheet, it says bound set of plans. The next thing it says is property record card, recorded proof of ownership. So that's 2 and 3, but on this sheet, it's 11 and 12. So if I'm trying to use these two documents, I can't use them together because they're out of order. And then, so then number 6 is engineering requirements, and SWPPP and NOI, that's on here. And then on the information sheet, it doesn't tell me what that is. So as a property owner, I have no idea what you're asking me for. Seems to me you need to explain, or at least have a definition of what that is on the information sheet.
Chair Jarvis, Commissioner Zerniak. So the double-sided handout that you have right there, sir?
This one?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
That is what we hand out for the constituents. The single sheet is what staff uses to ensure it's a checklist for them to make sure that each one of those is submitted when they submit for a set of plans. So I wanted you to have both so you could see what staff uses, because it's just a short checklist compared to what the constituents have when when that is given to them for the permitting. What is not in that packet, sir, is we also have a paper that has been presented by the Flood Commission, which shows where a pond needs to be, how to calculate the amount of flow and depth and cubic volume for that pond is in a handout as well. And so the SWPPP on residential, of course, is a SWIP. The NOI is a notice of termination from engineering. And again, a SWIP may or may not be required. If it's in a subdivision, yes. If it's not, if it's less than an acre. So there's some requirements there. But giving them some more information, I can certainly see where that would be beneficial.
Yeah, I just think having these two lined up would make sense.
We can work on that. Yes, sir.
Okay. And the other thing, Sean, is making sure that if this is what a property owner receives, making sure that we're not using acronyms that the property owner couldn't possibly know unless they go to the UDC and look in it and try to find it. And my comment there would be good luck.
Yes, sir. Understood. Most of the time when they come in, we explain everything that is needed to them, and that's just an additional handout for them to take with them to make sure that they have everything when they do submit.
Sean, look, I know you guys are busy, and I know from comments that I've heard about you and Albert, Christian, and Janine, and Christina, that you all work very hard, and you do explain things to people, so I understand that. I'm just talking about the paperwork that they walk out of the office with.
Understood, and we will work on that. Yes, sir.
Okay, we're good.
Anyone else?
That's it.
Good. Staff? Okay, moving on. Administrative approvals.
We're still working on that, Mr. Chair, considering that we're still dealing with our new software, and hopefully we can simplify the process and present something to you next month.
Okay, great. Thank you. Staff input?
In 2 weeks from today.
2 weeks from today, okay. Commission input.
A question, with all the catastrophic conditions that are happening in California and elsewhere, how is it that we're going to be able to burn up on some issues that would be coming up before us due to the fact that a lot of people will be probably migrating to the southwest, to maybe this area, who knows? You got any ideas to census data by chance? Permits? No?
The only thing we do have, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Acosta, is the census does put out estimates, but they're typically not forecasts, but we can kind of get an idea just based on averages from their estimates of, between census to see how many people are moving to this area. So we could put together some figures for you just based on the estimates and give you some guesstimates on average percentage of population growth over time since the last census.
And then changing it up a little bit, we just had that, well, I call it it wasn't a spot zone, but came close. Up in, with Chris Lyons on that subdivision, remember that? The last case we had? That was that to me, it seems like they just plucked out part of that portion of that subdivision there. And I wonder if it's going to set precedents on that. And Dr. Zerniak can discuss that. We were going to have a meeting regarding that, but the holidays came real close. What's your take on that, Janine?
Well, that was a subdivision that is part of the PID district that the Board of County Commissioners recently approved. So that was the first phase of their development. It was not a spot zone. It was already zoned for the appropriate development that they're building. It is going before the Board of County Commissioners at the end of this month for approval for the preliminary plat.
But I think what Mel's referring, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. What Mel's referring to is the disconnect between what Lyons perceived of what was going to happen there and what the developers wanted to do, and which one carries weight. And are we obligated to look at that old master plan as a guide or as a rule? I mean, we don't know. That's what was going on when we went in the back room. We were trying to figure out what our responsibility was vis-a-vis that master plan. And we need to resolve that, because if Santa Teresa ever takes off, I forgot to give you something. If it ever takes off, we're going to be SOL if we don't know where the master plan fits and how much weight it carries.
And I think that I'm sure we can figure it all out here, but I think we have to have a work session regarding that. That's my feeling, because it's going to take quite a bit to figure this thing out, you know. And Mr. Chair, if you're willing to have a work session, schedule it, and we're ready to discuss that.
See, I thought he was going to come in and support it because it was development. I was floored that he objected so strenuously.
Christina?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I was just going to say that I do believe that a workshop is warranted so that we can discuss the role of the master plan and the comprehensive plan, and any language in the UDC with regard. In their old code, there was specific language regarding master plans and significant changes versus minor changes, and I don't believe that the UDC has any language of that kind. And we may need to incorporate some language, and as well as address that particular master plan, because there are areas outside of the Alta Mesa area that have developed and are zoned completely different to what was in the master plan when it was adopted. So it's not just that specific subdivision that is an issue, it's the entire area that was reflected in the master plan.
Is that the same subdivision that I remember seeing lots ranging from 0.13 acres to above 2 acres? I mean, that to me seemed like quite a variance. So I would like some clarification on a subdivision. What do we do when we give them their subdivision permit? Do we stipulate the size of the lots? Do we?
Well, the subdivision itself will dictate what size of lots they're proposing. What we typically look for when we're reviewing a subdivision is whether or not those lots are in conformity with the zone itself. In most cases, throughout the county, when we receive a subdivision, there is no master plan that applies. In this case, there is one, and it obviously was adopted more than 20 years ago. So we need to look at updating the plan as well as what role that master plan pays in, what it plays in current subdivisions that are being proposed. And so I do think we need to have a further discussion separately.
When we set the UDC in place, there was something about a 2-acre minimum subdivision, and I don't know what the zoning was. Which particular zoning was that set for? I mean, because I remember having situations where farmers had big pieces of land and they were subdividing them into 1 acres at some point, and then we put in the UDC, and the proposal was 10 acres, and we finally settled on 2 acres. I think that's something that needs to be revisited again, and I'm just wondering, was it strictly for that particular zoning, or does that not apply to something like a subdivision?
Commissioner Fisher, it's the T2 zone, it's the one that has that 2-acre minimum. If somebody's proposing a regular subdivision in the T2 zone, then they're capped at 2 acres.
Okay.
If it's not going to be a full-blown subdivision, and if the property is not within a subdivision already, it's just a property out there in the middle of nowhere, described by meets and bounds, then they can apply for a claim of exemption, and they can go down to 3/4 of an acre. If it's going to be for a family member or a 2-lot split. Those are some of the exemptions that are out there. But if it's just a conventional subdivision, it's a 2-acre minimum.
So they're linked to the zoning?
Yes.
And,
Mr. Chair?
and BODA is going to restrict the heavy road use traffic. And it has been going on, and I believe that the city of El Paso doesn't like all that heavy road use traffic coming down both on the border freeway. So apparently they're going to be looking for alternative routes on heavy road use traffic, especially up there in the Santa Teresa area. So as far as I'm concerned, we need to make sure that we address that issue as well. We need to make contact with the city of El Paso and find out what's going to happen if they're going to close it to heavy road use traffic. We have to have some sort of communication with city of El Paso and Doña County as good neighbors and find out what actually is going to happen so we can divert traffic or have, like I keep saying, that highway between, what is it called, the High Mesa Road or whatever?
High Mesa bypass.
Yeah. When you look at construction and the way it's going, I-10 West, they probably know something we don't. And so I'm saying we need to make sure that we can look at all of that issues that are coming up for heavy road use traffic, for the planning and zoning of these areas. And the next question I have, is there any private property transversing that purported road or not? Do you know?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. I mean, I know a lot of the property out there, it's all federal or state land.
Because I don't know if it's state or federal lands. You're going to have a lot of work, Sean. Better pay, more people. Well, I wish I was county commissioner. Maybe we could help you. Okay. All right.
We good now?
I'm done.
We're good, okay. Commission input. Anyone? Item 9 is adjournment. See you all in a couple of weeks. Thank you very much.